Tonight, the reason this story matters is simple. In the last few days, the U.S. Justice Department has released a massive new set of records tied to Jeffrey Epstein, millions of pages plus thousands of videos and images. And those files are already reshaping political pressure in Washington, raising new questions for public figures named in the material, and reigniting a central debate. What is verified? What is merely alleged, and what the public can responsibly conclude from documents that include redactions, raw tips, and unproven claims. Good evening. I'm glad you're here. You're watching George Will Direct, and tonight we're going to do this the responsible way, carefully, calmly, and with clear separation between confirmed facts and unverified allegations. And as we go, I'll tell you exactly where information comes from, by website name only, as it should sound in a live broadcast. Before we begin, a quick personal note near the top of the program. If you value long-form, careful reporting that doesn't chase rumors for clicks, you can support this channel through Buy Me a Coffee. I'm older, I'm currently without a job, and viewer support is what allows me to keep doing independent journalism here on George Will Direct, researching, verifying, and taking the time to get it right. Now to the core development. According to reporting published on Reuters.com, the Justice Department released what it described as a major cache of Epstein-related records, more than 3 million pages, along with thousands of videos and a very large set of images. Reuters.com also reports these releases were made under a law requiring Epstein-related records to be made public, and that many pages are heavily redacted, which officials say is meant to protect victims and any ongoing investigative sensitivities. Importantly, Reuters.com reports that the Deputy Attorney General said this batch marked the end of the administration's planned releases under that law, though the broader fight over transparency and completeness is clearly not over in the political arena. Reuters.com. APnews.com independently reports the scale of the release, more than 3 million pages plus more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images, and places it in the context of a missed deadline set by Congress. APnews.com says the department missed a DECWA 19 deadline and then assigned hundreds of lawyers to review records for redactions, while denying it was attempting to shield any particular person from embarrassment. APnews.com also notes a key point that must guide how we interpret these files. They include references to famous associates, communications, schedules, and also investigative materials and tips, some of which are uncorroborated. APnews.com. That last point is critical, and it's where a lot of online coverage goes wrong. Because some of what's included in these releases, as described by Reuters.com and CNN.com, involves claims that are not confirmed. Reuters.com reports the Justice Department itself acknowledged that some documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims against President Donald Trump. CNN.com, reviewing the document set, describes FBI summaries and tip compilations included in the release, and clearly states that such memos can reflect what someone told investigators without showing whether the FBI corroborated it. When you hear people online saying it's in the files, therefore it's proven, that is not how evidence works, and it's not how responsible journalism works. Reuters.com, CNN.com. Let me slow this down and walk you through what we can say with confidence tonight. First, it is verified that Epstein was convicted in 2008 in Florida after pleading guilty to soliciting prostitution from someone under 18, and that he died in custody in 2019 while awaiting trial on federal charges. That baseline is not in dispute. APnews.com reports that prosecutors never charged anyone else in connection with Epstein's abuse beyond Maxwell. And APnews.com notes that neither Trump nor Bill Clinton has been publicly accused of wrongdoing by Epstein's victims who have gone public, while both men have said they did not know about Epstein's abuse of underage girls. Those are statements of record, and they matter because public understanding often blurs being in documents with being charged, or being associated with being proven to have committed crimes. APnews.com. Second, it is verified that many prominent names appear in these materials in different ways: emails, scheduling references, media clippings, and investigative records. But the meaning of a name appearing depends entirely on context. Reuters.com reports the newly published files include hundreds of documents that mention President Trump, and that many are collections of media reports. Reuters.com also reports there was an internal email file that referenced salacious accusations involving the president, but Reuters.com is explicit. Those emails gave no indication claims had been substantiated, and investigators noted credibility issues with some accusers. Reuters.com also states the Justice Department said some of those claims were untrue and sensationalist. That is a very different thing from a confirmed allegation, and it must be treated differently. Reuters.com. CNN.com similarly describes FBI memos and tip summaries as part of the new release and underscores that these records do not necessarily reflect verified facts. CNN.com also cites the Justice Department's own language warning that the production may include fake or falsely submitted material because public submissions were included if they were responsive under the law. The takeaway here is not that everything is true. The takeaway is that the government released a huge volume of records, and included within that volume are raw inputs, some credible, some not, requiring careful reading and independent verification. CNN.com. Now, beyond the political implications, the latest batch has also triggered renewed scrutiny of public figures internationally. BBC.com reports that the release includes photographs appearing to show Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew, kneeling on all fours over an unidentified woman who is lying on the floor. BBC.com stresses there is no context supplied in the file for the images, and it is unclear when or where they were taken. BBC.com also notes he has repeatedly denied wrongdoing, and that the BBC approached him for comment. BBC.com further reports that among the documents is a U.S. request from 2020 seeking to interview him, and that the request states he was not a target at that time, and that U.S. authorities had not gathered evidence he committed any crime under U.S. law, another important line that often gets lost in viral discussion. That distinction between being requested for an interview and being charged is essential for accuracy. BBC.com. The other name that has drawn intense attention in this tranche is Elon Musk, because the files include emails describing communications between Musk and Epstein. Reuters.com reports that in an email exchange, Musk asked whether Epstein had any parties planned and declined an invitation to visit the island. And Reuters.com reports that Musk later posted publicly that he had little correspondence, declined invitations, and pushed for the release of the files. CNN.com, after reviewing the documents, reports that communications show Musk tried to coordinate potential visits in 2012 and 2013, including a message asking which time would be the wildest party. CNN.com then states something crucial. It's not clear from the emails whether Musk ultimately visited. That not clear line is exactly what careful journalism sounds like when the evidence doesn't support a conclusion. Reuters.com, CNN.com. APnews.com also describes the same email exchange and again says it's not immediately clear if island visits took place. That's an important convergence between outlets. Multiple credible sources reviewing the release are not making the leap from email exists to trip occurred. APnews.com. Now we need to address another element, Howard Lutnick, because this is a case where the documents are being compared directly against prior public comments. Reuters.com reports that the files include emails showing plans for a lunch visit on Epstein's Island in December 2012, and Reuters.com reports that the emails appear to contradict Lutnick's earlier podcast comments where he said he vowed never to be in a room with Epstein again after an encounter around 2005. Reuters.com adds that a Commerce Department spokesperson said Lutnick had limited interactions with Epstein in the presence of his wife and has never been accused of wrongdoing. CNN.com also reports on the documentary tension between Lutnick's prior statements and the newly released communications. This is one of the few areas where the story is not, did a rumor happen, but rather, how do we reconcile the public record with written correspondence? That is a legitimate journalistic question, without implying criminality where none is charged. Reuters.com, CNN.com. And then there's Steve Tisch, the New York Giants co-owner, appearing in emails. CNN.com reports emails in which Tisch sought Epstein's help connecting him with women, and it quotes Tisch saying he had a brief association, didn't take invitations, and never went to Epstein's island, adding that he regrets associating with him. APnews.com also reports that the emails show Epstein attempting to connect Tisch with women, and includes Tisch's statement that he never went to the island and regrets the association. Again, that's not a criminal allegation in itself, but it is reputationally significant and newsworthy when it involves someone in a major public-facing role. CNN.com, APnews.com. Now let's talk about what is not supported, because the internet is flooding with claims that go well beyond what these sources actually say. One frequent claim is that the release proves the existence of a definitive client list with confirmed participants. CNN.com notes that many followers hoped for a client list, but CNN.com reports the Justice Department has denied such a list exists, and the release described includes many other kinds of records, draft indictments, memos, emails, tips, rather than a single authoritative roster of criminal clients. So when you see viral posts presenting a list as official and confirmed, treat that as not supported unless it is directly confirmed by a credible outlet or an official court filing. Based on what's reported in CNN.com's review, those viral lists are not the same thing as the records being described. CNN.com. Another claim floating widely is that references to President Trump in the documents are proof of guilt. Reuters.com directly contradicts that simplistic framing by reporting that the Department of Justice said some claims in the materials are untrue and sensationalist, and Reuters.com reports internal emails gave no indication accusations had been substantiated and noted credibility issues. That means the responsible on-air phrasing is, there are references, there are documents, and there are investigative materials, but that is not the same as verified wrongdoing. Anything stronger than that is not supported by the reporting we have in hand from Reuters.com and CNN.com. Reuters.com, CNN.com. Now, I want to pause here because if you've stayed with me this far, you can already tell this is not a hot take show. This is a verification show. And here's the re-engagement moment I promised. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to lay out what these releases change and what they don't change in terms of accountability, victim privacy, and the real-world consequences of releasing millions of pages that include redactions, raw tips, and sensitive material. If you want to come away informed instead of overwhelmed, you'll want that framework. Let's move into analysis. At a high level, these releases are producing three simultaneous effects. Effect 1, political pressure, especially around completeness, timing, and redactions. APnews.com reports the department missed its deadline and then said it needed extensive review for redactions. Reuters.com reports Democrats questioned whether all relevant material was provided, noting a gap between pages identified as responsive and pages released. And Reuters.com also describes heavy redactions, such as documents nearly entirely blacked out. That tells us the fight now shifts from release versus no release to how complete, how readable, and who decides what's withheld. That will likely play out through congressional oversight, litigation, and additional reporting. Reuters.com, APnews.com. Effect 2, reputational fallout for public figures, even absent criminal charges. This is the hardest part of the story to cover responsibly because reputational harm can occur simply through association, but it's also legitimate news when people in positions of public trust, corporate leadership, or political power appear in documented communications with someone later convicted of sexually exploiting minors. Here's the boundary we must keep. Appearance in the files is not proof of a crime, an email is not proof of an act, an allegation is not proof of wrongdoing, and a memo summarizing a tip is not an established fact. Reuters.com and CNN.com both model this distinction in their language, and we will do the same. Reuters.com, CNN.com. Effect 3, a renewed focus on victims, redactions, and the ethics of transparency. Reuters.com describes redactions as designed to protect victims or ongoing investigations. CNN.com reports criticism from victims and advocates about redactions and also concerns about inconsistent redaction practices. That combination creates a real ethical tension. Transparency can be a tool of accountability, but careless transparency can expose victims, re-traumatize survivors, and create an online feeding frenzy where unverified claims are amplified. The best public outcome is one where records are reviewed, victims are protected, and law enforcement accountability is real, not performative. Reuters.com, CNN.com. Now let me address the tone and style of the original material you provided because it matters. The transcript you supplied uses inflammatory labels and a mocking pre-game show framing. That style may generate clicks, but it also creates two serious problems. First, it risks defamation and unfairness by smearing people through insinuation rather than proof. Second, it distracts from what's actually at stake: documented failures of oversight, documented associations with a convicted sex offender, and the long-running question of how wealth and status can shape outcomes in the justice system. So on this channel, George will direct, we don't do ridicule in place of reporting. Let's return to what is verifiable and central tonight. According to Reuters.com, the Justice Department said this batch marked the end of planned releases under the governing law, and Reuters.com details the scope of the release and the way it includes references to prominent figures, including President Trump, along with documents that include unsubstantiated claims. Reuters.com also reports that the release arrived after the congressional deadline and describes the backlash around redactions and completeness. Reuters.com. According to APnews.com, the release is the largest to date under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and APnews.com describes how the department framed its process, the missed deadline, and the mix of materials, correspondence, scheduling, investigative references, and again the limits of what those things mean. APnews.com. According to BBC.com, the new tranche includes images and emails that increase scrutiny on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, while also reiterating that the documents don't provide context for the photos and that he is denied wrongdoing. BBC.com. According to CNN.com, the files contain internal memos and emails that raise questions and spark headlines, but CNN.com repeatedly includes not clear, unverified, and not corroborated language when evidence does not support a definitive conclusion. That's not hedging, that's journalistic integrity. CNN.com. So what happens next? Based on Reuters.com reporting about lawmakers being able to view unredacted versions, at least in controlled settings, and on APnews.com's coverage of the ongoing political pressure, the next phase is likely to involve supervised access, continued litigation and oversight, and more targeted investigative reporting where individual claims can be tested against court records, sworn testimony, travel documentation, and other independent sources. And as that happens, expect two things at once: genuine accountability reporting and a flood of misinformation. The difference will be whether claims are confirmed by credible outlets and official records or merely repeated by partisans. Reuters.com, APnews.com. I also want to say this plainly. It is possible for more than one thing to be true at the same time. It can be true that releasing records promotes transparency and public accountability. It can be true that releasing raw tips can amplify falsehoods and sensational allegations. It can be true that powerful people associated with Epstein deserve scrutiny. And it can also be true that due process and evidentiary standards matter, and that innocent people can be harmed by insinuation. Responsible reporting holds all of that at once, and doesn't pick the part that performs best on social media. Now, we're coming toward the close, so let me bring this home with a clear takeaway. If you watch this segment expecting a single dramatic gotcha, that's not what the verified reporting supports. What the verified reporting supports is something more sober and, frankly, more important. The Justice Department has released a vast set of Epstein-related records. The release includes communications and references involving many prominent figures. The files contain redactions and also include unverified public submissions. And major outlets reviewing the material are careful to separate what's documented from what's alleged and not corroborated. That is the truth of where this story stands tonight. And finally, because this channel only exists if viewers choose to support careful work, here's that personal note again as promised. If you'd like to support George Will Direct, you can do it through Buy Me a Coffee. I'm older, I'm currently without a job, and I rely on viewer support to keep doing independent journalism, taking the time to verify, to read the original records where possible, and to report without sensationalism. If you found value in this broadcast, your support genuinely helps keep it going. Thanks for watching. Stay steady, stay skeptical, and I'll see you next time on George Will Direct.